technology and how it can help in the fight against illicit trade. Technology cannot solve problems on its own. We need enforcement, we need penalties, we need regulation, we need legislation. It's a team effort. First of all, let's talk a little bit about illicit trade. It's a global problem, we all know that. There are no borders to illicit trade. It moves across all borders, all countries, all regions. And it's relentless, and it's becoming more and more complex. We have smuggled product, counterfeit product, IP infringement, and piracy. And they all operate together in their various forms, and they all operate individually, which makes it very difficult to quantify what this problem is. Some numbers for you. It's always good to put some numbers up for people to see. I would add that, as you can see there, none of the numbers have come from our organisation. Globally, BASCAP ICC believe that the illicit trade in all products worldwide is worth somewhere in the region of $1 trillion. Counterfeit and piracy, according to OECD, is worth in the region of $250 billion. In cigarettes, if we take the problem of illicit trade in cigarette trafficking, annually that is worth a region of about 600 billion cigarettes, and that comes from the FCA. And the tax revenue loss, according to Euromonitor, from tax lost on cigarettes is around $40 billion. So these are not small numbers, but what we are now experiencing in terms of counterfeit product, these are very poor quality, they're unregulated, and a lot of the money which is going from the proceeds of counterfeit and illicit cigarettes is now going to fund organised crime and terrorism. Essentially, sometimes cigarette products, and the money that is raised from there by criminals becomes a currency, which they then use for further crimes. So what can we do to tackle illicit trade? As I mentioned at the beginning, we need a coordinated approach on this. We need enforcement from the agencies. We need penalties which will then deter criminals. We need regulation, and from regulation, national legislation. And the missing piece of the jigsaw, which can help make this up, is prevention. Prevention comes, once again, from a team effort. We need national commitment, we need international cooperation, and we can also use technology solutions to help us. But as I've mentioned before, all the technology in the world cannot solve this. It is not a silver bullet. Technology, as we know, can be a key tool. It's growing in its use worldwide, and in terms of tracking and tracing, or authentication, verification, etc. And it's an enabler which enables us and governments to secure supply chains. And it's a provider of information. The information which comes from that technology is what can be used to track illicit products and illicit patterns of trade. However, the successful implementation requires a public and private partnership. The issue, as my colleague a couple of weeks ago at the Congress in Istanbul made the point, we need to join the dots. Currently, they do not join. We have illicit trade, which we've mentioned already. Regulation is now coming in terms to tobacco products. We have the FCTC protocol, an excellent tool as long as it can be implemented correctly. And the track and trace element of that protocol, we have the what, but we do not have the how. The individual what technologies are national and generally not international. They will not work across borders. They do not support tracking and traceability. They can deliver traceability, but often not tracking as it's prescribed in the protocol. And there are no global standards to many of these national technologies. They just do not join up. So how do we progress from this and help them join? We need the how in the technology. Technology that can work across borders, that are transnational in their very existence. We need workable tracking and tracing solutions that can deliver aggregation and verification of products. And lastly, they must be based on global standards. Global standards are required if they're to work on an international platform, and they can ultimately help us fight illicit trade. I'd like now to do a little comparison, a move away from illicit trade, if you like. I would like to guarantee that probably most of you in this room have a mobile phone. And in fact, I would also like to guess that probably some of you are actually using mobile phones right at this very time. The comparison I'd like to make is that when we all travel, we move across borders, we move from country to country. And whichever country we land in, our mobile phones always work. They pick up the network, and it doesn't matter if you're sat with a Nokia, an Apple, a Samsung, any other type of phone. They all pick up a network, and you can then send digital messages, you can talk to people, you can keep in touch, you can send photographs, you can send presentations, you can send media all around the world. The point I'm making is that the telecoms business, when they started out, took global standards to work on. A couple of questions now, based on global standards and technologies. Can a system which is required for tracking and tracing also deliver volume and tax paid status of different products? Can you tell which country a product has come from? Can goods that are in transit between countries also be verified effectively? And can you obtain a complete record of a product's journey, history, where it started, where it ended up, and even where it may have been diverted from a legal supply chain? Can law enforcement verify any product, anytime, anywhere? The technology needs to deliver for a government, and it also needs the enforcement behind it. A product, technology, can be demonstrated on a stand out in the exhibition hall. It can deliver real-time visibility and control for governments. What is produced, when it's produced, where it's going, who the customer is. And every single manufacturer producing that product has to be registered with that government. Ultimately, that can protect government revenues. And the technology enables the enforcement to increase their capacity and strengthen it. The technology out there meets international regulatory requirements, and we can guarantee a product's integrity. Importantly, it's very cost-effective. It's completely secure and relatively easy to implement compared to some other technologies. How can we make this happen? Once again, I go back to my colleague's presentation in Istanbul. There's a great start being made in this area. The WCO's IPM program and Interpol's Global Register and the iCheckIt system that they are putting in place. What we would ask from the Digital Coding and Tracking Association is a formation of a working group between all users and potential stakeholders, including those I've just mentioned, but possibly OLAF and brand owners and standards organisations such as GS1. Between us, we can define a coordinated approach to tackle illicit trade and utilize technology, which uses international standards to help successful and effective implementation of those technologies. Codentify as a solution we would say is complete. We can guarantee a product's integrity, we can secure a global supply chain, and protect government revenues. It's a fully integrated solution. And I would urge you all to go and see the Codentify stand and see it for yourself in action. All the pictures in the world cannot do justice to how this technology can deliver. And once again, please go and see it. I won't leave you with some questions. I'll leave you with some answers, hopefully. A system that national government can use to meet regulatory requirements. Tracking and tracing is possible across national borders. The system using international serialization standards to track products, important when you're moving across borders and countries and regions. A system using international data exchange standards, and once again these were used in the telecoms business when they set up their systems for us all to use mobile phone networks. A system marking every individual product with a unique identification number, which then can be used to identify and verify genuine products. Products verified using widely available devices, such as a mobile phone, which brings me back to the telecoms business and what we're trying to do in the Coding Association. We are using mobile phones to verify a product, and it can be done through an app or by SMS, making this available to all actors within the supply chain. This can be used by manufacturers, distributors, wholesalers, retailers, enforcement officials, and even down to consumers to ensure that they get a genuine product. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. That was very time efficient, but also very interesting, and will provide us, like the other session before, with a lot of ideas. And as he recommended, the best is also to see how these systems work when you go to the stands and get a presentation. That leads me to the last session of today, to round up our discussions of today, and I would like to introduce the moderator of the session on e-government and added value to trade, Mr. David Evans. He came already to the podium because he's from Bull, who sponsored the coffee break, the refreshment break just now, and he's the head of Tax and Customs Business Unit, Bull Information Systems. Please, David.
Thank you very much indeed, Susan. I'm going to ask our three speakers, please, to come and sit up here with me. This is the last session of the day, and it's very gratifying to see so many people have made it through the day with us to what I hope will be a very lively and interesting session. I'm going to introduce the first of our three speakers to us, and then I'll ask him to come and take the podium, and then we'll work through the other two speakers, and then at the end, assuming we have some time, we'll have some questions. Okay. So we're going to start today with Nick Small. Nick is Director of IT Solutions for Crown Agents. As the Director of IT Solutions, Nick manages the marketing and delivery of enterprise solutions which are designed to support revenue agency in the provision of their quality services. Nick, despite his youthful good looks, has over 20 years of consulting experience for both public and private sector clients. And before he joined Crown Agents, he had prior roles with both Unisys and Booz Allen, or Booz as they're now known. Nick has leveraged his extensive background in organizational change to assist organizations transform their operations, often through the application of advanced technology solutions. He has led consulting and solution implementation initiatives for a number of customs agencies with a focus on the facilitation of trade aligned with the efficient utilization of resources. So, Nick, if I can invite you, please, to come and take the podium.
Thank you, David. Before we came into the auditorium just now, David told me that he didn't have my bio, so he didn't really have anything to say about me. So, David, I'm really impressed with you memorizing that from 2 years ago when we worked together in Seattle on this event, but that was very well done. Anyway, good afternoon or good evening, everybody. Very glad to see all of you still here, impressed. I'm going to speak a little bit today about trends and a little bit about the future and what the future holds for us in trade and in customs specifically, and putting that under the heading of e-government or smart government, and what some of the things we may have to be aware of and have to watch for in the future. But first, just to give you a little bit of background about myself and Crown Agents, we're a development company at heart, and we've grown over many years into a center of expertise in public sector modernization and reform, primarily in emerging economies. And with our partner governments around the world, we actively study technology trends as a means to increase government efficiency, reduce costs while improving border management. We couple our insights into cutting-edge technologies with our knowledge of customs to identify innovative applications that can solve real-world customs challenges. So today I'd like to discuss some of those technology trends that will likely impact trade and customs in the coming years, and things that may be able to help government be smarter, more agile, and more effective moving forward. So firstly, what are the changes affecting trade? What are those trends? Well, some of this I may be stating the obvious, but I think it's important to reiterate. I mean, traders and users are more connected and online than ever before. In 2010, 4% of all internet traffic was via mobile devices. 2 years later, that figure jumped to 13%. So the world is increasingly connected and it's increasingly mobile. The expectations of citizens, traders, businesses are rapidly changing. Predictability and virtual professionalism will soon be the hallmark of a modern customs organization. Trading businesses are smaller and niche as well. AEOs are great, but consumers increasingly want tailored or bespoke products from niche brands and providers. Where Henry Ford famously said about his first car that people can have the Model T in any color they want as long as it's black, businesses now are providing tailored products for individuals. How this impacts traceability, classification, valuation of goods, and risk management in general affects the customs organization of the future. Also, the younger generations. Generation Y has grown up in a digital world. They're impatient. They expect to be able to find answers online. They want websites to be one step ahead of them. And I'm not just talking about the future traders of the world, I'm also talking about the future customs officers of the world. They don't want to graduate from college where they've used advanced IT solutions and interfaces only to find themselves in a technologically irrelevant organization. Generation Y thinks differently. By more effectively and efficiently using computers and mobile devices, they're ahead of us. But this shouldn't be viewed as a threat. This is an opportunity for us to grasp hold of technologies and new ways to communicate and interact with clients and stakeholders across the trade arena. The customs organization of the future has to embrace the capabilities of these future generations and ensure that the workforce technologies complement rather than restrict their skill sets. These changes will require customs organizations to be agile, efficient, and technologically relevant. I'd like to take a look at a few of the emerging technology trends. These trends apply to businesses as well as governments, both non-trade ministries as well as trade. Although, from our perspective, it's often based on our experiences in emerging economies, these trends apply equally to the developed and developing worlds. In many cases, the developing world is able to leapfrog into the latest technologies as they're unencumbered by legacy systems and mentalities. These trends are not mutually exclusive, and you will see how these trends impact each other and shape the way that value is provided to government, business, and citizens. I'm going to go into greater detail about each one of these trends and what it means for trade. Big data. Everybody's talking big data. But simply put, Moore's law, states that the capacity of computing hardware doubles every 18 months to 2 years. In effect, it grows exponentially. This has enabled a deluge of information and data. The growth in data provides new opportunities for customs to more effectively manage risk while facilitating trade. Data has existed since the first computers. The growth of data is what is making big data an opportunity, but also a challenge. More sensors, more platforms, and the ability to collect details about every transaction, every incident, from every perspective, provides for understanding, intelligence, and knowledge in an unprecedented manner. The volume, velocity, and variety of data that is occurring in the customs and coordinated border management space is becoming a growing problem, but again, it's also an opportunity. There's a growing proliferation of sensors, RFID, cameras, mobile, GPS, all providing new data points that can help provide real-time situational awareness. The problem now is often not enough data, but rather too much data. Although there is debate about real-time technologies, customs organizations must apply technology sensibly and cost-effectively across the supply chain. Visualization and analytics. To effectively use this data, customs must be able to filter out the noise and apply new analysis, modeling, and visualization techniques to make the data actionable. In the next decade, trade statistics will be taken to a whole new level with greater data and better analysis tools. Next, data velocity. With the proliferation of data, the answer is often there, but connecting the dots can take time. The 3 V's of big data: volume, variety, and velocity. For customs and trade, one of the keys to big data is increasingly velocity. It's not good enough that the data exists to determine that a container is high risk and should be inspected. Those data points need to be connected and analyzed as real-time information is received. Also, semantic technologies. Semantic technologies make data machine readable. Publish data sets via APIs ensure that data sets can be consumed by applications in creative ways for end users. Instead of letting 1,000 flowers bloom, government should publish data sets semantically and let developers let 1,000 applications bloom. As the web becomes increasingly semantic, computers are going to start solving problems, and we will struggle to understand how the answer was determined. Finally, data is a strategic asset. How does your organization use real-time data to adjust your workforce and operations? Customs management systems can provide greater insight into operations, but the private sector, social media, and other governments can also serve as strategic sources of data to help customs become more agile, responsive, and efficient. Increasingly, upstream activities that occur outside of your borders will influence decision-making and ensure traceability. Where semantic technologies are applied, real-time data collection and processing can occur, making risk management and traceability a dynamic activity rather than a stale process. In the future, real-time data will inform and guide customs officers to drive compliance and revenue while further facilitating trade. Data will increasingly become a strategic asset. Next, mobile. Sales of mobile devices such as smartphones and tablets will continue to increase over the coming years, moving to more than 1.7 billion units in 2015. Meanwhile, sales of PCs, laptops are expected to remain relatively anemic, with less than 400 million units expected to be sold. Developing a successful mobile strategy is no longer a nice to have. It's now an imperative. Mobile access and payment should be the norm of future systems. However, there is potential for mobile devices to increasingly be a more powerful tool in the hands of customs officers. Sensing and scanning technologies are increasingly smaller, integrated, and cost-efficient. So in summary, the world is increasingly mobile, and this has major implications for how business is done and how a customs workforce can accomplish their jobs. Everybody's favorite topic these days, social media. Social media is important. More than just a Facebook page, social media is a way to communicate with citizens and businesses and should be considered the norm for the digital age. If your website is the only way you communicate with stakeholders, you should consider social options. Social media is often effective because it provides users with the latest e-services and technologies via the cloud without having to wait for your IT department to deploy a new technology or to update a website. Customs guidance, provision of advice, or even the delivery of the WCO framework of standards, social media provides new and innovative ways to share guidance and, simply put, get the message out. Along the same lines, government feedback. This is not just about providing email feedback to government. Today citizens will create Facebook pages to complain. They'll tweet about issues, and they'll even upload videos that reveal vulnerabilities or gaps in border security. Mistakes and even corruption will be exposed quickly. Governments increasingly need to prepare to address this feedback in a positive manner and not just to point people in the direction of the official appeals and complaints page. In the digital world, individual complaints can quickly build into communities that can lead to movements. Governments need to stay on top of feedback and respond and adjust quickly. Similarly, government collaboration, whether it's your own government collaboration site, such as Yammer or something along those lines, or via public sites like Facebook, real-time government collaboration and knowledge sharing is best achieved through social media. Businesses recognize the real-time understanding of customers provided by social media. The ability to spot trends, gather actionable intelligence, or see patterns is provided by the data created via social media usage. Connectivity. The world's online. The need to transmit data electronically is obvious. Paper is increasingly becoming irrelevant. So integration of systems is vital. Web services, EDI, and standards will become increasingly important to help ministries communicate with each other, communicate with other governments, and for businesses to communicate with government. Additionally, with machines and devices increasingly talking to each other, there's less need for human involvement in coordinating trade and logistics. Citizens and businesses expect their governments to talk and share data. Although this is not always the case between governments, people often think that governments should share data to simplify transactions and minimize data submissions, such as the single window. So what does this all mean for customs? Well, governments and customs must be increasingly agile. Government feedback from citizen stakeholders is now pervasive. Governments must be increasingly agile to be responsive to the changing demands of business and citizens conducting trade. The successful 21st century customs organization will be able to adjust quickly based on improved situational awareness and predictive capabilities to meet the demands of trade. Consumers, businesses, and the markets will drag technology-stale governments into the 21st century. It's imperative that we plan for this new paradigm. Organizational change management is essential for any new technological change, but especially for these major paradigm shifts. Every new technology means that people will be impacted and their roles and responsibilities and power will change. Provide your workforce with a heads up when implementing new technologies and help them to understand why it matters. They may not like it, but at least they should understand why it's happening. With the introduction of every new technology comes the need to establish standards and a way to apply and manage the technology. Without going into great detail regarding architecture and standards, it would only be recommended that standards are kept simple, elegant, and designed for the lowest common denominator. Keep it simple. Publishing data sets. We've said it's imperative that we establish what the truth about our organization is, our rules, and our domain. In a data and app-driven world, truth is often determined by what developers connect to as inputs into their apps. It's no surprise that the US, UK, and many other countries around the world are actually actively pushing semantic technologies and data.gov type initiatives. This is a way to share information according to your perspective rather than allowing it to be determined or shaped by the global internet community. I'd also like to point out that, in this whole topic of new technologies, it's vital to also look at cybersecurity, and in a sense that will be a topic of its own. The geographical distribution of our organizations and our staff and offices demands that cybersecurity solutions are elegant, efficient, and recognize local limitations. But most importantly, it's important to create a balance when addressing cybersecurity so that we don't end up with a situation where we're locking people out due to the complexity of that security. So very quickly, I'd like to sort of end on some of the newer innovations that may or may not represent some of the game changers that we're going to face in the coming years. One topic that's sort of been in the press over the last couple of weeks is 3D printing. 3D printing is already available with simple designs, and 3D printing may revolutionize, to some extent, cross-border trade. With IP becoming increasingly the value that will transit borders, customs organizations will need to contemplate how they deal with this new paradigm. Similarly, sensors are becoming smaller, increasingly mobile and elegant. Technologies that test, detect, and identify are advancing and maturing quickly. It's a matter of time before handheld devices can quickly and easily scan, test, and detect various forms of cargo. Collaborative consumption, or the sharing economy, another trend, leans on the use of social media as a means to communicate and trade. Increasingly, goods and capital are shared by citizens and businesses rather than purchased outright. It is in the interest of governments to encourage the optimization of goods and the efficient allocation of resources, but this new trend will create challenges for trade. E-currencies and Bitcoin, these emerging potential game changers may or may not help facilitate trade, but they also may represent threats in the sense of the ability for black market trade to proliferate. Finally, one last potential future trend is Google Glass, a brand new technology that we at Crown Agents are looking at to determine innovative applications in the trade facilitation and customs space. As you may know, Google Glass has a wearable computer, a camera, a miniature screen, and the ability to communicate and interact with the internet via voice commands. In the future, Glass may provide customs officers with the ability to instantaneously identify cargo, have real-time translations of documents in other languages, conduct virtual inspections of cargo for other government regulatory agencies, or conduct real-time identification and verification of logistics personnel. This is one of the many technologies that our innovation team is currently reviewing to help us prepare for the future. Now, I don't mean to say that all these technologies will truly emerge. I also don't mean to say that all of these technologies are necessarily disruptive. And in fact, they may present great opportunity for customs organizations and organizations in the trade space to, again, improve efficiency and enhance operations. But that's the real challenge. The real challenge is finding innovative ways to apply these technologies to better fulfill the traditional mission of customs. So with that, I'd thank you for your time and would welcome you to our booth in the hall next door to discuss any of the topics that I raised today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that, Nick. Quite a fascinating and wide-ranging review of the impact of new technologies on customs. I'm sure that all the valuation people in the room look forward with huge dread to the first valuation cases which come from 3D printing and how on earth are we supposed to value a design done in one country and then printed out in another. Okay, if I can just say to the final two speakers, if you see me frantically going like this, it means we're running out of time. So hopefully we can keep these to about 20 minutes each. The next speaker is Tom Butterley. Tom is currently Deputy Director of Trade and Sustainable Land Management Division within UNECE, who are, of course, the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. In that role, he is responsible for all matters relating to trade facilitation, the UN Center for Trade Facilitation and Electronic Business, UNCEFACT, and also capacity building. He was formerly Senior Trade Facilitation Expert at UNCTAD. Prior to joining the UN, Tom worked extensively in Zimbabwe and in Mauritius and also in Canada, which is your native country, I believe. Is it your native Canadian? Yes. Ah, okay. And in trade research and economics. Tom holds both a BA and MA economics, and also has a diploma in telecommunications and technology from Dublin. So Tom, without further ado, if I can invite you to take the podium, please. Thank you.
So, thank you, David, Excellencies, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure for me to be here at this conference. The WCO is one of the key partners of UNECE in our standards development and implementation. We've worked together for many, many years. And indeed, it's a great pleasure for me to present this topic on a single window. A single window, I believe, is one of the key trade facilitation recommendations that delivers benefits to government and trade. And it's one of the key UNECE recommendations in the trade facilitation area. So some of you may wonder, what is UNECE and what are we doing here? Well, UNECE is one of the 5 regional commissions of the UN. We report to the Economic and Social Council. And pretty well every country in the world is a member of one or other of the economic commissions of Europe. And within this grouping of economic commissions, UNECE takes the lead in trade facilitation and electronic business. UNECE, basically, we're a standards development organization. We develop standards in a whole range of various standards and conventions and recommendations, from transport to trade to statistics to environment and so on. People have been talking a lot about global standards over the last few days, and well, that's our business, standards development. Our key body, intergovernmental body in the trade facilitation and electronic business area is the UN Center for Trade Facilitation and Electronic Business. That's UNCEFACT, and it's been mentioned a number of times already today. UNCEFACT has a global remit. Although it's based in UNECE, its members come from all around the world, all 5 continents of the world. Over 300 experts. We meet every 6 months in various locations in the world. Our next meeting was scheduled for India. And the recommendations are approved by all UN member states. So this is definitely not UNECE European focus. It's a global body with a global remit for global standards. And WCO is a key participant in CFACT. In fact, we have a whole domain, a customs domain. And that's for example, the WCO data model is based on UN CFACT standards. And for those of you in the customs area, some of our key standards are UN EDIFACT. EDIFACT is one of the standards we developed and maintain. UN layout key for documents. Low code was mentioned earlier. I have one of my staff full-time just maintaining the UN low code. And these are used throughout the world. So that's what we do, and that's why we're in this area. And single window is one of the recommendations we developed. We started work on this in the early 2000s. And it's a recommendation that has grown in stature enormously over the years. It was launched in 2004 after several years of discussion, because recommendations are developed through consensus through all member states. And for example, the WCO is heavily involved with us in the development of this Recommendation 33. And basically, Recommendation 33 is the baseline, is the key foundation standard for single window. And we weren't too sure when we developed this recommendation what was the level of interest globally on it. And we had our first workshop in 2004. We set up a room for 50 participants. We thought that would be about right. We had 250 people come to that first workshop, and we said, whoa, okay, there's something going on here. This is a hot topic. And we have had many, many workshops since, and I think many of you in the room have been part of those workshops and have gratefully and greatly contributed to the work in developing single window, because we all learn from experience. And one of the later workshops we had was a retrospective in 2011, where we looked back on basically the last 10 years of single window to try and see what were the lessons learned. And I will draw from the various papers that were delivered in that workshop in my presentation today. But I would encourage all of you in the single window, especially those at the earlier stages, to look up these websites, look up the EC websites, and particularly that conference, to see the presentations made by countries that had implemented single window and some of the directions for the future. So just to be on the safe side, I make a presumption that everybody knows about single window, but just going back to the basics, the fundamental idea was to enhance the efficient exchange of information between trade and government. And the fundamental idea behind that was to reduce time at the border, to make trade more efficient. And it was said earlier, this is how we grow trade. The OECD estimates that 1 day lost at the border equates to about 1% loss in trade. That's pretty huge. I've seen larger figures than that, but I'm going with the lower estimate. 1% for every day stuck at the border. So if you want to grow trade, that's probably the quickest way to do it. The basic idea is single window. It's a facility that allows parties involved in trade and transport to lodge standardized information and documents with a single entry point to fulfill all import, export, and transit-related regulatory requirements. And if information is electronic, then individual data elements should only be submitted once. I read this definition again because it has stood the test of time. And the Recommendation 33, as I said, is used by all the key donor organizations like the World Bank, like the DFIDs, like the GTZs of this world, to help countries implement. So we just didn't stop there with Recommendation 33. We developed a whole suite of recommendations following up on the level of interest in this. And these are all fully available. All UN recommendations are public goods. You are our employers. So these are all your products, basically. We have Recommendation 33, the single window recommendation and guidelines, 34 on data harmonization for single window, 35 on the legal framework for single window, and we're currently developing Recommendation 36 on single window interoperability. And if time permits, that's really what I want to focus on today. We also have all of the underlying standards, the data standards. We're a techie organization. We develop a lot of technical standards like data element definitions and core component libraries and all of that stuff I won't go into here. But we also have, for the more normal people of the world, a lot of guides. guides to single window implementation, guides to data harmonization, etc. And all of these are fully available and freely available through our website. And I'll just mention, you might, if I can get this little thing to work here, yeah, this Trade Facilitation Implementation Guide is an interactive tool we've developed, and it has an awful lot of information on trade facilitation, and especially single window. And I'll be giving a short presentation on that tomorrow in Tech Talk 1 at 3 o'clock. So you're very welcome to come to that. So, oops, pressed the wrong button. Yes, so what, we've been doing this for 10 years, so what? What have we learned? Well, we have seen that the single window has been a fantastic success. It really has been a fantastic success. The World Bank estimate that their single windows are in 71 countries. Our own estimates are larger than that, but these are the documented ones. So single window is great. It works, it delivers benefits for trade, for government, it helps coordinate, it does a lot of things that were not even conceivable 10 years ago. It's very much a step-by-step approach. It takes time. Some people compare it to eating an elephant. You eat it piece by piece. You don't try and do it all at once. It's a worthwhile, definitely a worthwhile endeavor. Single windows have become a strategic national instrument to facilitate trade and enhance, this is the key thing, enhance collaboration between trade and related government agencies and between government agencies themselves. And in fact, this is the key challenge in single window. Single window is not a technological concept. Single window is a collaborative adventure. It's classic e-government, getting agencies to work together electronically, e-government, agency to agency. And it's all about building that collaboration, building that trust, building that partnership, building that vision for the future that speakers have mentioned earlier today. So it's not easy, but it's very rewarding. An interesting point is that single window is more common in developing countries, economies than in developed economies. This might seem like a contradiction because it is fairly techie oriented. But this, we find, is due to the fact that in developing economies there are more open green fields, as they say. There are more opportunities to implement single window, more opportunities to make real change. Whereas in the many developed economies, it's not that they don't realize the benefits of single windows, but there's so many legacy systems already in place, and there's so many complexities and complex systems. It's difficult for them to throw all that out the window and put in a single window. This is a real challenge, and I have some thoughts on that I'll mention to you. A big question that we're being asked by organizations all the time is interoperability. How do we interoperate between one single window and another? This is a big question. Another few observations is that one size does not fit all. There are many different types of regulatory single windows and approaches, and this could include a customs single window, a trade single window with other government agencies, transport regulatory single windows such as the EU maritime single window. And in addition, there are many what we call logistics single windows, such as port community systems, e-freight, e-commerce, etc. And the possibility exists then of many single windows in one country. This is sort of a contradiction in terms, but this is the reality that we face today. And interoperability between these single windows, even within a country, is a major challenge and a major opportunity at the same time. And then when you try to exchange information across border, of course, the issues compound. Now, we, perhaps naively, had a very simplistic concept of how this would all evolve. So you start off with a custom single window, you go to a regulatory single window with other agencies, you then expand to port community systems, you then expand to other service providers such as banks and so on, and then you expand to a global single window. That was the idea. And very few single windows have achieved this. Very, very few single windows, if any, have achieved this. This is a vision, this is a dream. But what we find is that the scenario in many countries, especially developed economies, is more like this, that you have separate e-commerce, e-freight, port community, maritime, and trade single windows. And then the challenge is, how do we join these pieces together? And I'm just checking my time to see is the guillotine getting close, but I'm okay for a couple of minutes. Okay. How do we pull these pieces together? This is the real challenge that faces us, because within all the systems I just mentioned, you have many overlapping uses of information, and that's defeating the concept of single window, single entry, reuse and reuse of data. How do we do this? This is the challenge facing what I would call the mature single windows, the ones that are already in place. But it's also the challenge for people starting now, so you start thinking of this for the future. So what would this look like? Well, we could have something like this, where we have the regulatory agencies, the transport, the port communities, the e-freights, etc., all working together, integrated, connected, interoperable. Easy to draw a diagram like this, very easy to draw a diagram like this. How do you do it? Well, we need a vision of interoperability among the single window operators. How do they connect? What's what we call the inter-organizational information system philosophy? What kind of information do I want to exchange? How do I exchange it? What's my business model? What's your business model? How do we share this information amongst each other? What type of information? What type of standards? And we've mentioned standards, and we're a standard-setting organization. And standards may, and I say may, be a necessary condition, but it's definitely not a sufficient condition for this to work. There's much, much more to be done than standards. So we need to have a global repository of possibilities, of how I publish information, about my data formats, my rules, my contacts, etc. And then we need to consider, how do we get back to this single entry point again? This is getting back to basics. And then there's a whole range of other areas which I don't have time to go through, but the legal framework, the service level agreements, the trust that was mentioned this morning, accessibility for developing countries and SMEs. This is very, very important to us at the UN. Security issues. And then we have to consider, are we talking documents? Are we talking messages? Are we talking data pipelines? What are we talking about here? What do we mean by this interoperability? And how do we use things like the WCO data model? And we have David Keskett, I believe, somewhere in the audience here, who's done a lot of work on this data pipeline idea. That's getting back to the basics of data. So these are some of the challenge. This is one possible scenario, and I say possible scenario. This is not agreed with anybody. It's just something we put together for this workshop. And it shows the different layers, interoperability layers, and the different framework layers. And I see a mistake there already. I see digital signature framework. That should be electronic signature framework, because we're technology neutral. But okay, you can forgive me one mistake. But the political context, the legal interoperability, and so on, and UNCITRAL, of course, that's their domain. The business models interoperability, the semantic interoperability, that's what we do in CFAC. And then some of the technical standards, that's what ISO, ETSI do. And of course, the WCO framework of standards is in there, and the WCO data model. This is part of the framework. So we need to pull all of this together. This is the challenge to us as a standards organization. And I've just one slide left, Chair, if I may just go to my last slide. What are we doing then to respond to this challenge? Well, as I said earlier, we're working on this recommendation 36 on single window operability. We're gathering case stories, such as the ASEAN case story, for example. We're gathering frameworks. We're considering what is the framework, the model, as I just described. What would the single window interoperability concept look like? And we're also developing, in collaboration with UNCITRAL, a revision of Recommendation 14. I think this was also mentioned by one of the speakers this morning, on authentication of trade documents by means other than signature. And Lance Thompson, one of the CFAC leaders of that project, is with us here today as well, so I'm sure he'll be happy to talk more about that. We're looking at the possible development of a recommendation for interoperability between data exchange systems in both the domestic and the cross-border trade, and this is what all the experts coming together do. And we're also considering asking everybody that I mentioned there before, asking all of you, the port operators, the single window operators, the e-freight people, the maritime single window people, etc., to come together with us in early 2014 to see, let's try and work this out so we can actually get a solution to this, so we can actually have a framework where I can exchange information with you, you can exchange information with me, and it's not just data standards, it's how do we want to do business. And a very interesting example of this is the PEPL e-procurement project in Europe, where I can have my standards, you can have your standards, but we can still talk to each other through an interpreter. This is one way. I think if we should never wait for the ultimate standard. It's never going to happen. We have to move on. We have to be pragmatic. Let's see how we can do it. And I would warmly welcome you to participate in these initiatives. Please join us. Join us with CFAC. Join us through this work, because it's only through your participation that we can get there, and we can get there in a way that you want us to get there, step by step, working together for the solution that works for us all, e-government, business and trade. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Tom. Obviously, as moderator, I'm being very generous on timing tonight, but I'm sure we'll get through to the end. It's interesting because as a representative of the technology industry, I've always maintained that the technology issues relating to interoperability are solvable. The other issues, the protocols, the conventions, the legal aspects, that probably outside of our control, but certainly the technology aspects we in Bull have always believed are solvable. Yep. So I'd like to introduce our last speaker of the evening. This is Mr. Eli Sawaya. Eli is Deputy Managing Director of Bureau Veritas in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. During his career at Bureau Veritas Government Services and International Trade Division, sometimes known as BVAC, Eli has helped many governments in bridging the gaps and leveraging their public services through capacity building programs. He's assisted governmental authorities in setting up their business plan for their integrated border management solutions and then following through with the execution of defined strategies. He's well recognized as a specialist in both risk management and also e-government solutions. Besides developing the strategic positioning for integrated border management, e-government solutions, he's also built strategic partnerships with technological key players in the field. He's led the development of supply chain risk management solutions, in particular for fraudulent shipment targeting. Eli has managed major government contracts for BVAC in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. His main fields of expertise are contract management, quality systems, supply chain management, operational excellence, large-scale e-government, and risk management. So, Eli, if I can invite you to take the podium for our last presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So, hello, ladies and gentlemen. After the comprehensive review we had on the evolution of single window during the last 10 years and the journey to the future we had with Mr. Nick Small, now we are back to present. And we are going to see why Benin was awarded the IT Gold Award from the International Association for Ports and Harbors for its single window solution. So the question we asked was, is e-government an added value for trade? It is definitely an interesting question, because 3 years ago, the Benin government asked the same question, and the answer was the setup of the SEGUB, the Société d'Exploitation du Guichet Unique du Bénin, which is a public-private partnership between the Benin government and Bureau Veritas SOGET. For the ones who do not know Benin, well, Benin is actually a country on the West African coast. Its capital city is Cotonou. It is at a major crossroad between two important corridors in West Africa, the Abidjan-Lagos corridor and the Cotonou-Niamey-Ouagadougou-Bamako corridor. So why the Benin government had to ask this question? Because they had some recurrent problems. They had a lack of visibility over their customs revenue and some issues and problems in their supply chain, like the permanent congestion in the port of Cotonou, and the high operating costs, including some, let's say, hidden payments, with a lot of delays at many stages in the supply chain. So the objective was delay control, operational excellence, and duty maximization. And the importance of the question was because the port of Cotonou alone stands for 60% of the gross domestic product of Benin. So it was not the first experience for Benin in implementing a single window. Some attempts have been done through the last 20 years. Some of them were with just an exclusive IT approach. Others did not take into consideration change management. So the projects were a failure. This is why it's important to take into consideration the total cost of ownership and the learning curve whenever we talk about a single window project. And it's important to take into account the change management, the technological expertise for the implementation, the financial means, because all of these projects need the financial resources, and most important, political support. So, knowing that the objectives were delay control, operational excellence, and duty maximization, the time framework for the implementation was very quick. It only took 11 months to deploy the solution, and after that, we had immediate tangible results. So it was the complete deployment was in October 2011, and we will see what were the results in 2012. So, as we all know, port community single window is a solution which brings into contact all the parties that are present in a port. But I want to stress on one important point, which are the banks, because it's also important for a single window to be a one-stop for invoicing. So a single window should issue a single invoice for all the parties that are involved. This is what was done in Benin, actually, and this single invoice is called the bordereau de frais unique, which was crucial to the success of the project. It is true that single window project is not just an IT project, but it's also, we have an IT platform that is running. So in Benin, the 3 tiers architecture was selected. We have the presentation layer plus communications layer, which included all the translation engines and servers between the different edifacts standards that we have, and a presentation layer, then the application layer, which included all the business intelligence and processes, and finally the data layer, which was the persistence layer. All the stakeholders could connect either through the private network or the internet, because it's important also to do some redundancy on the telecommunications means, because the single window should operate all the time, even when we have some communications issue on some links. So in Benin, change management was essential. And without the government leadership in the project, it wouldn't have been a success. So the different ministries and government bodies were in several committees, and these committees used to meet weekly. A lot of training has been done. So we have 1,200 persons who have been trained, like they are freight forwarders, customs agents, shipping agents, cargo handlers, so all the stakeholders in the port community. And there was a strong political backup for the project. The result was an increased state revenue and transparent transactions for customs and for the port, and reduced transit time in the port with an increased reliability in customs procedures. So now, what should we expect as results whenever we implement a single window? The most important point is the transparent process and the reduction delay. So, delay reduction, sorry. For the Port of Cotonou, with the institution of the single window, the waiting time for the ships went down from 8 days to 48 hours. So this was a solution for the port congestion. The customs revenue also increased by 25%, although the merchandise flow only increased by 10%. And some structures, like the Conseil National des Chargeurs Béninois, tripled their revenues. These were not only the only results, because as an added value for trade, we had also some international visibility for the Cotonou port, whose main objective is to become a hub for the sub-region, because as you know, a port can work to supply the interland, and on the other hand, it also is a transshipment hub. So adding some visibility on the international level is extremely important, like what the Doing Business report of the World Bank recognized, which was that the time for the container passing through the Benin port was reduced drastically. So some of the tangible results that we will see are the reduced invoicing time, because each institution had to do its invoice. Now, while having a unique invoice that is validated by all the stakeholders, the invoicing time was reduced by 75%. And on the other hand, the container dwell time for imports for local market consumptions fell from 39 to 6 days. And also because as we said, the port of Cotonou serves also the interland, so the container dwell time for containers that were in transit fell from 46 to 8 days. So now you know why the port of Cotonou was awarded the IAPH IT Gold Award. And if you want to know more, you are welcome at our booth, the Bureau Veritas and Sojet booth in the lobby. Thank you.
Ellie, thank you very much indeed for that. An excellently executed project with very clear and objectively measured successes, which I think is superb. I think as well it illustrated a point very neatly which Tom had made in his presentation when Tom talked about the different layers of single window. And I particularly pointed out that the third, I think it was the third layer, was the port community layer. And Tom made the point that quite often governments go to that layer first. And I think, particularly from your project, Ellie, there's a couple of reasons of that. First of all, for port community systems, there is good, robust, transferable technology available, which has been tested in North European ports and which can be transferred to quite easily and creates quite a stable platform for port community systems. And secondly, I think, is the measure of success. It's very easy to see dwell time and reduction of dwell time as a very clear indicator of success. And if we go back to the famous World Bank Cost of Doing Business report, I mean, it's clear there, and it's clear for governments. And as we know, most ministers of finance now, they make it clear that particularly competitiveness on those indexes, regional competitiveness, is very important to them. So, Susan, I hope we have a couple of minutes for questions, if you don't mind, because I'm sure, despite the late hour, there will be some interest from the audience. There is microphones amongst you, so if I can see hands up for any questions, please. Anybody? Somebody must have a question. A hard one. Ask a hard question. Or an easy one. Right at the very back there, we have a questioner.
I'll help you out, David. With
Thank you, David.
question.
You're very kind.
Nick, I think one of the problems that we're facing, although we may not recognize it just yet, is this growth of social media. And you talked about predictability and the opportunity in the future. You did ask for a difficult question. And the opportunity in the future of customs doing business differently. And rather than operating with the traditional import and export declarations, the possibility of capturing data in what is now called social media, but in the future will probably be called something else and will be the way businesses work. I just wonder, what's your take on that? What's your view on some of the potentials in the future? How that data might be captured about the goods? We already heard this morning about export data and import data actually being the same, capturing upstream, and you know, and Tom kindly alluded to it in his presentation about the Cassandra project and how we're trying to move that data capture. I think there was a lady that said something this morning which I don't think was given a lot of recognition about this whole philosophy of moving the responsibility for capturing data right upstream to the shipper. In my paper, I talk about the person who packs the box. So if we're moving in that direction, which is going to have a huge impact on the way we do business now, what's your take on that? How this social media is going to move to something in the future will simply allow us to capture this data, apply some of the predictability algorithms. I'm sorry, interpreters, that's probably a bit tricky, that one, but some of the predictability algorithms that will allow us to operate risk management in a totally different way. I said it was going to be difficult.
Thanks, David. No, I think, I think we believe that, the social media, and as you say, whatever name we put on it, information, big data, whatever we refer to, information is becoming more prevalent, is more accessible, and we see trends in the private sector where, information is being mined in non-traditional ways and non-traditional sources to drive decision making. I don't think, I don't think we should think any differently. I think we have to sort of embrace the fact that technology, the access to information is changing, and we've got to be able to recognize where are the most efficient and practical points to capture information and then leverage it, and not to be set in our ways and believe that the way we do things today, and as you say, the declaration is the declaration, and that has to be the source of all decision. I think we've got to be open to the fact that a transaction starts with somebody, potentially wanting to buy something and somebody wanting to sell something. And so information is being gathered, is being captured throughout that, decision-making process, and there are points along the spectrum, and we've got to embrace the idea of being able to use information, from appropriate sources, but use it, go a bit beyond the way we look at it today. I'm not sure that answered your question, but.
So, any more questions? No? Okay. So I guess that brings us to the end of our session then, and all that remains for me to do is, of course, to thank our three speakers most profusely for taking us on a journey that goes from far future visions to concrete examples of work being done now, which I think has been absolutely superb. Suzanne, I guess, is coming up to close the session and tell us what's going to happen this evening, which I think we're all very excited to learn. And the only thing that remains for me to be done is, as I say, to thank everybody and hope to see you all again tomorrow morning. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, David, and thank you to the speakers. You took us really on a very interesting journey. As everybody, I think, is already keen to go to the gala dinner, I will not say anything unnecessary other than ask you to be here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. So we start at 9 in the morning, sharp 9. Tonight, our hosts, Dubai Customs, invite us to a gala dinner, which will start at 8:30 p.m. As it is a gala dinner, please wear a formal attire, which means either traditional clothing or men with a suit and a tie, and women elegant as they usually want to be. The dinner is in the Asater tent, which is very close from here. It is in principle there where we have been last night. Next to that place, you will see a tent. I'm already very curious because our hosts have prepared, I think, a very special gala dinner. Whenever you talk to one of customs, they have a big smile and are looking forward to this dinner as much as we do. So I'm very curious to see what it is. And with that, I would like to wish you a very good evening, entertaining evening, and enjoy.